Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for returning. My name is Lindsay Bostock. I'm the Director of Artistic Planning here at the Art Center at NYU Abu Dhabi. And so thrilled to have another conversation in our career chats, looking at the different career paths of different people that work across the Art Center, both on the academic and the presenting side. I want to give a huge shout out to the U.S. mission to the UAE for supporting our youth engagement events, as well as Mubadala, our lead sponsor, and all of our media partners, and all of you for being here and joining in these conversations. I would like to thank our NYUAD student moderator, Michael Leo, who is both a producing intern and a junior here at NYUAD studying interactive media. And a huge welcome and thank you to Judi Olson, who's an instructor of costume design, as well as an incredible actress and singer, to talk about her career and her work at the Art Center. Without further ado, handing it over. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Hi, Judi. Awesome to have you here.
Thanks, Michael. Glad to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So I think we'll just start off with, a quick introduction. So could you please introduce yourself and maybe shortly discuss your career path leading up to your current role at NYUAD?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually am a graduate of NYU in New York. So Lindsay, thank you for the recognition of my performance side as well, because that is my outlet into theater, was the performance side via high school, but I also grew up sewing and doing sort of crafty things with my sister. So I think anyone who's been in theater will discover that if you have multiple skills, they will be utilized. So both in high school and in college, I ended up doing a lot of costuming, which I really enjoyed. And I mean, I also, I was fortunate because my high school experience was varied in that I did the acting part, I did the costuming part, I also stage managed, I helped out with whatever. And then I was able to continue that in college, which isn't necessarily typical, but the studio I went to, which was Playwrights Horizons at NYU, builds that into the curriculum. So as part of my education, I picked sort of like, I like to call it a minor major, because as far as the university is concerned, I was a drama major, but within the studio, I was an acting and design major. So I sort of took this dual path. Although I would say my greatest education came from working alongside other designers. So one of those designers I worked with was with a theater company. So one of my professors, Ruben Polendo, had this theater company, Theater Me Too. And so I started interning with the company, and then I started working alongside their sort of resident costume designer. And then that led to further projects, which eventually led me out here to Abu Dhabi, both when the university opened in 2000, well, I guess it opened in 2010, but the first student production was 2012. So I actually came out here to do that student production, and I did the costumes, even though we kind of didn't know what it was going to be, and it was pretty epic. But because of that, I ended up coming back to do all the shows, and then when the full campus opened up, I applied for the full-time job, and I've been here ever since. That's the sadly, that was the short version.
No, completely understandable. You've definitely got a breadth of experience behind you. So, like, talking about that, you clearly have experience in several aspects of stage work, ranging from acting to stage management to costume design. So, was there anything in particular that influenced your decision to take the role of instructor in costume design specifically, as opposed to, stage management or acting?
Today, A2, A4, 4, 1. Okay, 4, A4. Okay, thank you.
So that is a good question. There is, I guess I could have done stage management, but that didn't feel like my main route. And in fact, sometimes I do kind of miss the stage management part of it, because that part is fun, the sort of organizational aspect. But I think a lot of my decision to go into costume design versus, say, like also like set design is I do like construction. I like to craft things so that they are, going from sort of, design on flat paper to a 3D model or whatever that is. And then the fact that I had been here before and I'd already discovered all the shops and kind of navigated how to costume design here versus in New York versus in Boston, where I'm from. I felt like I was quite lucky. The year I was hired, quite a few instructors were hired, and I felt like I already knew the lay of the land. So I didn't have that aspect to my career. So I could just focus on that. But also one of the things that I really enjoyed when I came out here temporarily was that I didn't have to do any other side jobs. I was here just to do the costume design, which was a major departure from my experience in New York City, where, you have like a survival job, and then you're trying to find theater jobs, and then you're trying to navigate the schedule of those. And it's really, and also commuting, because while I love New York City, it's also like, you're at least an hour away from where you need to be at all times. So you have to build that into your day. So it was exhausting. It was a machine. And then when I came here, I was able to just do costume design. And I was like, that's the dream. That's what anyone wants to do, is just do the thing they want to do. So I was very excited to come here and do that. And then fold in the sort of teaching element, because that was different coming here as a visiting artist and being here full time with a day job, as I like to call it, is different. But I was excited to get into the more robust academic aspects of the job.
Absolutely, thank you. Just to let everyone in the audience know, we will be taking audience questions, so just feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them soon. All right, so Judi, you mentioned how like the costume design experience, like the production experience, varies in each of the cities that you've worked in. Could you talk a little bit about that? Maybe just walk us through the process of costume design for performance. I realize that's a huge task, but
no, no, it's a good question, because it does change. And I've had various forms of this conversation, because people always want to know, what the actual job is. You're going to get into it. And certainly it varies depending on the level you're at. So say, I guess in the Boston area, my experience is mainly community theater and high school related, because that's my background. I still have friends who are in the public school system, so I will do their productions, and that's sort of more contained, I guess, in that like they have a costume stock. We have specific shops we go to, more like thrift stores, that we sort of like, we have a shared language of what's available. And so it really is, I guess I wouldn't say a group project for the costuming part of it. I'm still doing a lot of the work on that, but there are more discussions where like they already know where I'm going to go. And also like there might be a moment where we go through the stock together and be like, so what's our starting point? In New York City, it would be more professional shows. So like I did this show, my most impressive credit to date was I was firsthand for an off-Broadway show, which meant I was just building the costumes, and that title can vary depending on the theater you're at. But that one was exciting because it was like an actual playbill, but that also meant that I didn't have as many connections in that world. That was the highest show I had done before. So it was sort of meshing my skills with what they had available and discovering at the same time. And also more excitingly, they outsourced a lot of the things. So I was making some of the costumes in-house, but we were also outsourcing some of the more intricate costumes just for time. And then also they had hats built. So like that was another vendor. So, and then also the designer. So I was not the designer on that show, but the designer was one of my former professors as well. So, you know, that was more of a like learning how to navigate that world. And then here in Abu Dhabi, there is, I don't know if other people feel this, but it feels like we are, NYUAD is part of the burgeoning art scene. Like we are a central location. And I think the Art Center is a big part of that in terms of the community. And even in 2012, it was, you know, the only thing on Saadiyat was Monorat on Saadiyat. And in fact, that's where we did the productions because there wasn't a physical space. So, you know, when we came out here, they were like, we don't even know where you're going to get fabric. But then it turned out that was not a problem at all. Just walked around Sama Tower, which is where the university was, and you know, surrounded by fabric shops. So that was the beginning of it. And now at this point, it's establishing the shop to the students, and then it's always like it feels like we're always starting. Because this is an educational environment and because the students are going in and out, like there is always this sort of like teaching the basics level, which is kind of fun for me. I get better when I am able to teach it. And then, you know, we're building towards a more continuous group of people who can help with the shows and work towards that. But it's also like, Michael, you might feel this, that students are pulled in every, 16 different directions on any given day. So at the end of the day, it is also like, what can I do by myself? Where can I have assistance? And where can I be teaching those skills so that people can continue with it? So I guess it's also educational versus professional varies widely for the experience.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a really important part. Speaking as an NYUAD student, I think that's a really important part of our experience, figuring out, what we're trying to learn for now, what we're trying to learn for when we're eventually going to be working in the field. So yeah, just to get a little more specific, because so Judi and I worked on the Caucasian Chalk Circle together in a production in my freshman year, which was set in like this during the Soviet era in a country that's pretty much hinted to be Georgia. So I guess this is more of a niche question, but I'm really interested. How does the process of costume design differ when the performance is set in like a specific historical period or a specific location around the world?
Well, that's a great question. Well, and I don't want to, no spoilers, but I also want to contrast that with the current student production, which is the water station, which has very little specific information. I mean, the thing is for me, I guess this may be a personal thing, but I think a lot of designers feel this. A lot of our design is rooted in the research. So when you have a very specific time period and, time period and location, it gives you an anchor to at least start with that. The Caucasian Chalk Circle is a really good example of it too, because we didn't necessarily stick with like a specific year and a specific place, but we used that as the jumping off point to inspire the costumes, which is, I would say, the most fun. It's almost like a little puzzle. It's like, you take your research, you take the actors who are, doing the work, you take the director's ideas, you take the other ideas of the designers, and then you piece it all together into one full design. And it can lead to some like fun variations, I guess I should say. Like, I just came across this in the shop the other day, but on that production, I had a little vest for one of the characters, and I had decided to shorten it because he was supposed to look a little more young and ridiculous, as opposed to, I could have just, like there was a lot of military language in there. There's soldiers and things. So, I was giving him this official looking garment, but then and he was tall. He was a tall actor. So like by giving him a short vest, it kind of like, I don't want to say infantilized him, but like, the point of it was to give a visual clue that he's a little more ridiculous than some of the other, or less senior, I guess. Versus now we have the Water Station, which was, it's originally a Japanese play, and there's no dialogue in it, which I don't know, maybe that's a spoiler, but you can read the play online. That's not a secret, which also means that gives us more freedom to decide those things, both between the director's ideas, my ideas, and the actors' ideas, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that the audience is going to walk away knowing exactly when and where it takes place, nor is that that's fine. That's not, it's not a history lesson. It's a creative expression, but it also that means we can kind of do anything, which is not always as freeing as it sounds. So it's just, it's a balance.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited to see the water station once it's out of the works. So I think there's one question from the audience that really connects to something that I had in mind to ask you, but I think we'll jump ahead a little bit and ask what was the most memorable production for you in your career and why?
Great question. Well, I would say here in Abu Dhabi, I mean, if I can, it's hard to pick just one. I really enjoyed the experience of the first student production here, which was the Ramayana, which was actually a recreation of a production Theater Me Too had done before that I had seen referenced. So I was happy to then become a part of its next step. It was also literally an epic. It is an epic story. So the costumes, so I didn't have to design them. All I had to do was recreate them, but based on old video, which 90s videotape is less clear than maybe the easy access to video we have today, and then a few of the sketches. So that was, and it was really, that whole project was a marathon, all of us just coming in together to do it. So that was, and I arrived, that was probably one of the scariest things I've done, because I arrived really having no idea if I could pull it off. So when we did in fact pull it off, it was great. And those costumes are still in the costume shop. So just don't look on the inside. Amazing. The seams are maybe embarrassing. And then overall, memorable. Yeah, they're also, every show has its unique sort of flavor. Sometimes I do shows, and when I start out as a performer, I'm just because in school they pick the shows and you just have to do it, or decide not to do it. So there's shows that I have not been excited to do at the beginning, but the act of doing the show really you create a bond between all the other actors and yourself and the show. There's a show called Godspell, which was it has great music, but it's not much of a story, and it has a lot of religious context. So I was not super excited to do that one, but it became an exercise in improv and working with the actors, which was it was a big milestone for me in my performance. So those things are memorable. I'm very long-winded.
No. This is all, I'm sure our audience appreciates it too, but I found this really interesting. So we'll do one more question, then we'll go to the audience questions, which are trickling in. They're really interesting. So just once again, to encourage everyone in the audience to put in any questions you have. So last question from me, what is one piece of advice you would give to students interested in the performing arts?
Well, performing arts in general, I would say just, well, these kind of go together, but one is that it's never too late to start. I remember being I had certain ideas. I had a very narrow idea when I was younger of who was allowed to do theater or performing arts. I basically thought you had to be born with the talent and born with the ambition, and that if you got started too late, then that was it. You couldn't do it. But that's not true. And also learning a skill versus having it inherently, I think, can be more valuable, which is not to, stomp all over people's natural talent. More power to those people. But I definitely feel like I have learned and relaxed more into the arts. And I was very, very fortunate in high school to have, so the theater teacher changed from my first year in high school to my second year. And so the first year, that director was basically obviously close to retirement because he retired the following year. And he was great. He was very theatrical and he did everything, but he wasn't really teaching at that point. And our new director came in and taught theater as an academic class, which really opened up my whole theater world. and then, you know, I did all those things. And so my stepping stone, like the reason I did stage management and costume design and performance was because I was shy and I wanted to get into it. And so I found all those little outlets. So it's, you know, it's never too late. And you never know which outlet is going to let you in, but there's many, many different paths into it. So there's no, like, don't look at someone else's path and think you can't do that. And also don't do something that you're not having fun with. Like you can switch it up and it's your path and not anyone else's.
Absolutely. I think those are some valuable messages, especially like it's never too late to start. I feel like it's really important. A lot of students at NYU realize that like during their 4 years here. But yeah, okay. So moving on to audience questions. So we have one that's like a little bit, it's about where you get your materials from. So it says sourcing material and special materials, are they overseas or locally sourced? And if you're getting them from local vendors, where exactly is that? So the students are curious if you were going to the souk here.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm about to name drop all my favorite stores, but I mean, this is a good question because the best place to go is the place you go to all the time, because when they recognize you here, the stores are very local. It's not like in the US, you go to a place like Joann's Fabrics, which is very corporate. It's a chain. Like you probably would get to know the people if you went every week, but they can't change anything for you. The price is the price. Here, I had this big dream to come up with this like book of all the places you can go with all of the, you know, prices and things, but I discovered it's really just best to keep going back to the same place. So I end up going back to this. My favorite store is called Al Amara Textiles, which is over in the Madinat Zayed area. And that's because when we were at Sama, I would just walk right over there and find it. But there's tons of fabric stores in that area. That store is also next. So that place sells a lot of fabric, but right next door is another store that sells all the little bits and bobs you need, like thread, needles, ribbon, elastic, zippers, buttons, snaps, all of that. So it's kind of one-stop shopping for me. So those are my favorite. Sourcing locally has become much easier. And I guess I should say online local sourcing has become easier. The online shopping boom that we are experiencing did not exist even 8 to 9 years ago. It was a bit of a struggle. You know, as much as I'm sad about Amazon taking over everything, it does make it easier to get some very specific things. So I try and not do that, but it's also knowing that it's there if you need something specific. And that's also a product of me coming from the US and looking for a specific product. So sometimes it's a brand name that like we don't know what it is in Europe or here, and we just don't have time to go find it. But it is much, much easier to even just get things locally at the mall these days than it was. There seems to be more variety, and there seems to be more a better turnaround on things. Oh, and then also craft-wise, there's a Green Branch, which is also by Sama Tower. These are like Googleable if you're interested, but also like there's tons of fabric shops just in that area. If you walk around the super block, there's many, many fabric stores.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I was looking for white sheet for a film production, and there was so many options in Medina Zayed Shopping Center and around it. Yeah. All right.
You can bargain.
So sorry?
You can haggle down the price, you know, just walk away like that's too much.
Yeah. All right. So we have another question. How much do you connect with the director to come up with the overall theme?
So that's a good question. That does depend quite a bit on the director. I prefer to work very much, you know, close to the team. I have done a show a few years ago that basically none of the design team really connected with each other. We had a few meetings, but it wasn't collaborative. It was more just reporting on our progress, which was weird for me. And yet that is, you know, certainly one of the ways to go. So, I mean, I can't really start a production until I've spoken with the director, but you can always, the process is sort of, you know, read the script. You may or may not be saying yes to it before or after you read the script, but I'm usually agreeing to a show before I read the full script, and then I receive the materials. And then there's always a connection point, like at least a few conversations And then it goes back and forth for a bit, like maybe they'll bring some images, I will bring some images and we'll talk. And then ideally, I will attend a rehearsal or several or many, but it also is because because I am both designing and building, there is often not as much time to actually attend rehearsal when that's valuable sewing time, but always in constant contact, and then notes. And actually my favorite part is the moment where we have something on stage and then we can do notes, like editing. It's kind of like, I like to compare it to writing a draft. Like writing the draft is the hardest part and it exists, and then you can go back and edit it, and that seems less daunting.
Yeah, absolutely. Having something to work with. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we have two questions that sort of connect with each other. One is, can you be a costume designer without being able to sew? And the second is, how can someone with an interest in costume design begin developing the relevant skills? So are there any resources you'd recommend?
Yeah, okay. Well, I love the question about, can you be a costume designer without being able to sew? Absolutely, definitely. Actually, that show I did off Broadway with my professor, he does not sew, nor does he really draw. So one of the other, and I don't really draw, like I'm not a super talented visual artist, but generally, I guess the part I haven't mentioned in the process, because I'm not as good at it, is sketches. So, you speak with the director, you come up with designs, you do research, and then you sketch out the designs so that everyone sort of knows what you're doing, and then you go off and build or collect. But collecting costumes is a big part of it, where you don't have to sew at all. So the professor I was working with, he his sort of niche work is collecting items, and then he brought me in to sew things in that case, and that has a lot to do with, I guess, your status level, but he never learned how to sew. So there's always that. Design is also at the lower levels in educational. You are designing and building or collecting or whatever it is that you're doing, but there is a moment where you can just design and hand off your sketches to a shop and they will do it. So, I mean, I like to sew, so that was my outlet into this, but it's definitely not necessary. And also, you can have like the most basic sewing skills, like sewing on a button will get you into a shop. They will like have you iron and sew buttons, and then you can see what they're doing. In terms of the skills, it's a good question. I like to start building the skills. Was that the question?
Yeah, how do you build the skills? Are there any resources you'd recommend?
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. The biggest thing one can do, especially when you're young, is to immerse yourself, like to just like immerse yourself in the world. And you, like, your local theater scene may look different than anyone else's, but read plays, like find playwrights. There's the standards, and if you go to like a typical conservatory theater school, they'll make you read Shakespeare and Chekhov and Peter Brook, I don't know, but there's tons and tons and tons of theater out there that like are less famous, and so you can like find what you like. Reading a script in words and seeing it is also vastly different. So if you can, I would read a script and see if you can find a production of it, whether that's live or videotaped or whatever the case may be. Even the movie version, like say, I don't know, I can only think of musicals right now. There's others, like Chicago is a very famous musical, and it's coming to Dubai, so if anyone wants to see that. But there is a movie available. So if you were able to find that script somewhere and then see how people interpreted the words into that, that starts sort of building the connections between those two mediums. And then in terms of like actual skills, sewing is one, drawing is a big design skill. And that's just something, both of those things you would just need to practice. Neither is very difficult. Although I don't like to tell people that sewing is actually quite simple, because it is a sort of magic that people, if you don't know what it is, it looks very difficult. And I like to pretend I am very skilled, but in fact, it's quite simple, and it's, lucky that it's just such a mystery until you learn it. So, and then it's just practice. It's just doing it over and over. So read plays and things, or draw, sew, and then thrift shopping or even just finding what you need in big box stores like H&M or Mango is, that is a skill. Like you have to, so I feel like sometimes I can see something in my head that is maybe like set in a specific time period. And then I can say like, okay, well, we can go to H&M and buy this type of coat and we can modify it very slightly and it will look like what we need. But that is something that I think just takes time to sort of know the pieces of clothing and how they can be manipulated. But that's, I mean, it's kind of a good exercise to look around you and see what people are wearing and see what else you could do with it.
All right, that's very cool. That, especially that last bit, really interesting to think about how you can change already existing clothes. I would love to continue this conversation for much, much longer. And in fact, there's going to be like 1 or 2 audience questions we won't be able to get to, but a little over time, we have time for one more question. So that is, it's about like conflict resolution between the costume designer and the performance group that they're working in. So the question is, my group that I work with only wants to bring their own costumes from home. How can I explain to them that they need to think bigger and connect to the character?
Interesting. Good question. All right. Well, I mean, there's a couple different ways. I guess I would say start with what they're bringing from home and then ask them what it is about those costumes that they're connecting to so much. Like why do they only want to have those costumes? Is it because they're comfortable wearing their own clothes, or because they feel like they've already done a lot of work on that design, so they don't feel like changing it, or like, what are the reasons? What is the connection to it? And then so if you're starting there from where they're thinking, then you can fold in your own ideas about that, and then sort of come to them where they are, because if they're that adamant, then they must have strong feelings, and strong feelings are the root of good design. So even if you disagree, I do think even two people disagreeing is much more interesting than 2 people kind of agreeing. If that makes sense. Like you'll end up in a much stronger place if that's the case. So even though it can be frustrating to disagree, if you can find the common ground where there's passion, I think that will be more useful. Good luck with that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Judi. And thank you so much to the students of ACS who were able to join us today. With that, I think I will hand it back to Lindsay. Thanks again, Judi, for this incredible.
Thanks, Michael.
Over to you, Lindsay.
That was so exciting. Thank you so much, Michael and Judi, for not just telling us a little bit about your career trajectory, which we always love hearing. What about our youth and what about our interests actually lead to where we are now? And sometimes that's not a completely clear path. And when you're a young person, it's sometimes hard to remember that actually the things you like doing are the things that you actually can do. And Judi, you're really a testament to that. I also loved hearing about all the Abu Dhabi specific places to shop and ways to get creative beyond what's right in front of you. How can you take something and really reimagine it and reinvent? So thank you so much. We hope that everyone here in the audience enjoyed this. And if you missed it live, we're excited that it will be part of our YouTube channel and uploaded to watch on demand. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks again to the US Mission, to the UAE for believing in our programs. And thanks everyone here. We'll see you again.